Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Molly.
And you're listening to the
Two Sisters on Adventures podcast.
It was such a beautiful morning that morning, albeit a little hot early on.
I saw a reel on Instagram just today, actually, and it was like waking up in your tent on a sunny morning and the person is like in their mummy bag and happy, and then all of a sudden like and like just like unzipping their bag and like taking their jacket off and then like crawling out of the tent. Like, it feels so nice outside. And it's true, when like tents are so good at trapping heat and reflecting it, when it's a sunny morning you're like, oh my gosh, get me out of here.
So we
Did you hear a goat during the night or no?
Might have. I actually feel like I slept really well that night.
I feel like though we got in the tent and then you heard something and you were like, get away, get away. And we didn't know if it was an animal or just a sound. And then Carrie's like yelling from inside the tent, right?
I feel like I did that like periodically. I was like, back. We have nothing for you here. I peed farther away from the tent than this. That's funny. Yeah, I definitely did do that. Not just once, but several times.
And you know what? I have only watched one sunrise this year on trail, and it was because we got up before sunrise to hike. But I did obligatorily have, I think, my alarm go off. Looked out the tent, no clouds. I was like, well, I don't need to see the sunrise, so I'll just let the insane oven-like heat of my tent wake me up in another 2 hours.
Exactly. We should like bring cookie dough with us so that we could wake up to fresh cookies.
That sounds like a great idea. Not.
Side note, I actually once traveled in a van with some people who like thought that they could bake cookies from the heat of the sun, and they like on the dash, and they spent days. They were like, well, the problem is that we don't have it in a reflective pan. And the problem was that they didn't have a pan on top of it. And one of them was like, it was the worst thing ever because we spent all day smelling the smell of fresh cookies.
No.
And after 12 hours every day, it was like still so deeply uncooked, and also now cookie dough that had sat out for 12 hours at a very dangerous temperature that they couldn't eat it. He was like, we have to just stop this madness because we're not getting cookies and we're having to smell them all day long.
And so it was actually warm enough to smell the scent of cookies?
Yes, they were baking, but like at the lowest possible temp that you can bake them.
It's like instead of like doing like a slow, like making ribs, you're like, yeah, I'm making these cookies, but I'm doing it at 150 degrees for 12 hours.
Exactly. And you can't do that. And it was probably only being cooked at like 112 degrees for 12 hours. And it didn't ever fully cook. So like at some point he was like, guys, we're buying a dozen cookies every day that we're then just like making melt in the windshield.
They would do a dozen in the windshield?
Well, where would they store the rest of the cookie dough?
And did they buy a reflective pan in which to make the cookies?
Yeah, they bought, well, it was not a pan, I guess. It was literally cookie sheets. So like they bought one cookie sheet and they had a dozen cookies that were just sitting there, and then they were like, well, we need to top it with a second cookie sheet.
They put the cookie sheet on top of the other
to trap the heat. I don't know. Anyway.
And this was in what state?
Texas.
Oh, okay.
So the end of the Alaska. No, I'm just kidding. It was in Texas. So at the end of the day, we probably shouldn't bring cookie dough to cook in our tent because it would just cause more problems. Also, you shouldn't store food in the tent.
I severely doubt that it even got to 112 degrees in there at 8 a.m., although it did feel like it.
It definitely did not. Okay, so we rocket out of our tent because we're so hot we're gonna die. Then we decided we're gonna go have our breakfast down by the creek. And the one downfall to camping on like the highest spot in the land is that then you had to like do a little scramble every time you wanted to get to a water source. And so we were like, okay, we got to gather up everything we need. I was like, do we have the water filter? Because, that would be so annoying if we had to go back up to get the water filter after we spent all this time like scrambling down. So we've got everything. We go down, and of course we forgot the jet boil.
We being me, I suppose. Oh, man. And so I actually looked at it on my watch, altitude-wise. It was like 70 vertical feet we had to scramble up and down. And it was not a very far distance. So yes, you're like modified rock climbing to get back up there just to get the jet boil.
And of course I always say I have like my morning eyes on. So like I'm like, whoa, where's this? Where is that? I'm like almost like a trail that or it's like a scramble I could confidently do the night before, but in the morning I also have like my sandals on. I'm just like tripping. My hands are completely filled with items. But we made it down. We made it alive. We had our little breakfast beside the creek. It was so cute. It was just fun times. And then we kind of headed back up to start getting things together for camp. Now, one thing that we had decided to do on this backpacking trip as a way to reduce our impact on this site, I knew that it was a ton of granite up there. And so we have wag bags, which would be bags that you can poop into versus pooping into a hole, basically, if you don't know. And so we decided that we would bring those because the thing about granite is it's hard to dig a hole through it when you need to bury your waste. And so
I'm remembering a comment on the John Muir Trail for one of the passes where they're like, you would definitely need a jackhammer to dig a cat hole. And for some reason, we felt that bringing a blue bag was lighter in weight than a jackhammer.
Yeah, I don't know why. And also maybe less of an impact. We're all like, to lessen our impact, we brought jackhammers to the wilderness for our human waste. So that was something that I was so glad that we did, because honestly, I'm sure someone somehow could find a site that's both, 200 feet from water and not granite. But I don't know. We didn't look very hard because we knew that we didn't have to dig a cat hole, but it seemed like it would be a really challenging place to dig a cat hole that wouldn't leave a trace. You know what I mean? That wouldn't be either too shallow or too close to water or too close to camp. So I was really glad that we had made the choice to do that. And honestly, we've done a little more mountaineering this year, and we've had more experience pooping in wag bags from our very first time on the Copper Ridge Loop till now. And I actually really kind of, as Sharman would say, enjoy the go. I really enjoy it because it's kind of it's so stress-free now. It's like, instead of thinking like, okay, where's my cat hole? Or I got to dig a cat hole. I got to bring the trowel. I got to make sure I can cover it up. I got to make sure I dug it deep enough. It's like you just take the bag, go into the bag, and then you shut the bag. And so that's what we decided to do for this trip. And honestly, it worked really well. It was super easy. And so I think probably on future trips, we'll always just throw like an extra wag bag in, just in case you ever find yourself camping in a spot that might not work for digging a decent cat hole. So once we were done with that, we just kind of packed up the rest of our stuff, and we decided that we were going to go explore the basin because we hadn't explored it the night before. So we just kind of walked around it to enjoy and look at it. We thought of doing a scramble up to Granite Peak, I believe. Yeah, but we kind of just decided that didn't feel like it was necessary that day. We had to drive all the way back to Paulsbo, where we were staying for the summer, and Molly was going to work the next day. And honestly, we just had a nice time already, and we knew it was going to get hot again. So it kind of just felt like it was, and I didn't feel like I wanted to leave my camp down there either. So we just decided that we would walk around the basin, check it out. We saw a ton of really cute places that you could probably camp or swim. And then it was time to make our ascent, because we went down to the lake, and then our descent. And
it's kind of interesting because it's once again being a lot of user-made trails. When we had gotten like close to the top of our ascent the day prior, there was like a pretty well-trodden trail and some cairns to follow, and we started following a trodden trail on the way back down. And then it was like just totally different than the trail we had taken to get up. So then we just traversed across granite slabs for probably 0.2 of a mile until we got back to kind of like the path that we had taken to get up. So it was interesting how either, if you're orienting with a map or your GPS technology, you can keep an eye on that, but also know that it's an area where it's a lot of rocks, not a lot of trees. And so you can kind of just traverse to where you need to be, as long as you don't like start to descend too soon and then end up like getting cliffed out and having to backtrack. So that was interesting and honestly kind of fun. And then, we started the descent. When we made it to the snowfields we had crossed the day before, we did indeed see that someone had post-holed the day prior. So once again, team slightly earlier in the afternoon was probably good on that part of the trail. And then, it took a while to get...
Which I will say, you can also post-hole and live.
You can post-hole and live, and that's actually when I post-holed thigh deep. I was perfectly fine, with the exception that I cramp on myself in the leg, but that healed just a little. Anyway, so Yes, you can post hole and live, but it's a weird, I don't know. I had a weird fear of it, I guess.
She has a weird fear of it.
I do. Ugh.
Unless you got over it in the past like 3 days.
No.
It's okay. We all have our weird fears.
True. So the descent, I kind of thought was fun.
Yeah. I think it's just one of those things where like you will probably not like this trail, quote, I put that in quotation marks because it's, not really a trail. You will not like it if you only want to walk on a trail at all times. Like, honestly, I feel like our little kind of descent of the granite was just fun and chill because we were like, well, I think I've gotten to the point where I'm kind of like, when I'm up high and I can see everything and I have GPS, I can kind of just side hill. I can make it back to where I need to be. I don't have to be on the trail every second of every day when there's not one clearly available to me. Like, I'll be fine. But I think that several years ago, I'd probably been like, oh, where's the trail? We got to get back to the trail. So if you are still increasing your comfort level, or if you're just not interested in doing stuff where maybe you're off trail for 5 minutes and then you just find your way back, maybe you wouldn't enjoy this. But I think that for the majority of people, as long as you're okay with some like minor scrambling, you would be fine. But yeah, the downhill was honestly pretty fun and it was pretty chill because I feel like we found the trail better on our way back and we just kind of knew what to expect. So, sometimes you got a big step down. Sometimes you got 2 choices of rocks that you're going to go down and you just kind of pick it. And it didn't take us very long, it didn't feel like, to get back down to the actual trail. And it was nice because this time we were actually on the trail. So going around Tuck Lake was way more simple than we had made it the first time. Obviously, there's still little cliffs that you have to go up or down. You might lose it for a few seconds here or there, but it never felt like as kind of like, where is the trail, as when we got sidetracked on the user-made trails. We didn't really spend any time at Tuck Lake again. It's very pretty, but it just, we had places to be and we were ready to go. So we kept heading down. I don't even think we got water from the lake, right? Yeah, we just kept heading down, and obviously the trail down is much easier because you're not exerting yourself to go uphill. But the rocks were pretty loose there, so you have to be careful of your footing so you don't just slip and fall on your butt. And finally, we kind of just made it back down to a little bit more of a foresty area and back to the original trail we'd taken to get to our car.
We made it back to the waterfall area that we had rested at the day before, and my tendency is often to just go, and Carrie's tendency is like, hey, maybe we should like take a minute and filter some water and have an electrolyte. So we had just a nice little rest and electrolytes, and then we continued on, and then pretty soon we were, finished with the majority of our elevation.
And one thing I will say about our little stop at the waterfall, I feel like we learned a couple years earlier when we'd gone on that same trail, and maybe we'll talk about it more then, but that sometimes you're going downhill and you just want to slog it out and you're like, well, it's only just basically downhill or flat from here, so I should just keep going. I can just keep going. But you're starting to feel really hot, and it's like you don't even realize how quickly you can cool your body temperature back down by just kind of like sitting by the river, having a little bit of water, splashing some water on yourself. And so we did that then, and it just made us feel like, in the long run, I think it made us a lot faster. So it's just something to keep in mind where, like, yes, maybe the rest of your miles are downhill or flat, but if you're like getting really hot and there's a water source, it's probably, even if you don't recognize how hot you are, it's probably a good option to just stop for a couple minutes, get some cold water, cool down a little bit. So then we did get to head back down our downhill area. And honestly, the trail around Highest Lake is pretty chill, but it does go like up, down, which is, I feel like my body likes to go uphill or downhill. It's like, what? You're going to make me go uphill like 5 feet and then downhill 10 feet and then uphill 20 feet and then downhill 5 feet? Like, how am I supposed to find a gear? So we definitely just kind of cruised along the shore of Highest Lake, but we really wanted to swim in it. It's beautiful and it looked so inviting, and we kind of figured the reason we didn't want to swim earlier is because I didn't want to be like wet the whole walk down to the car, but we figured we'd probably dry off in the last few miles. So we kind of kept an eye out for a good little spot in the shoreline. And then we finally saw one, and Molly was like, let's just go here, because sometimes I get into this tendency where I'm like, well, we can find a better one. And then it's like you've walked past the last like good optional entry to the lake.
Or I was thinking at that point, I think we were maybe 3 miles from the car, and I was like, if we keep waiting, then we're going to be a mile from the car, and then that gives us 15 minutes to dry, and that's not sufficient. So we just stopped, and then we like took our packs off and everything, and we waded into the water, and it was so cold. Like, I couldn't believe it. I was thinking that like Robin Lake was super cold because it's at like 6,200 feet of elevation, and here we are at like 4,000. But I think it just must be that all the water from the Alpine lakes around it drains down into that lake, and it doesn't warm up for some reason, but it was chilly. So we did our same wading method as we slowly went deeper into the water. And then it was really kind of funny because in the section we were at, there were a bunch of submerged logs. So we were trying to navigate around them because we didn't need to be stepping on them or anything. And so did you swim too, Carrie? Okay. So we both then took the plunge, we swam, and Carrie's swimming. And did you stand up on a log by accident?
What happened was I put my hand forward and I was just on a log, and I was like, it's so gross. It's just weird because it was clear water, but also when you walk in it, you stir up everything in it, so then you can't see. I do feel like that was one of my favorite swims of the summer because it was just so crisp and refreshing and so fun. And then as soon as we got out, it was crazy because again, we'd gotten kind of hot as we were walking out, but it's the kind of hot where you're I'll just push through. But I feel like I didn't sweat again on that trail. Maybe I started to sweat a tiny bit at the end, but I just had brought my body temperature back down to where I was actually comfortable hiking in 85 degrees or whatever it was almost the entire rest of the hike. And I was like, that is such a hack. And probably everyone does it except for us. But it's such a hack where when it's really hot out, you get in the water and then you don't even have to feel sweaty or miserable. You just kind of can enjoy the rest of your walk out. And so, yeah, we just kind of walked back to the parking lot where there was even fewer cars than ever before, retraced all our steps, and there was only a few groups going in, which again, I would just say the more into the weekdays that you can go anywhere, the more likely you're going to have a chance of just enjoying solitude. So that was kind of a awesome little end to our trip to get to dip in Highest Lake, which we kind of had wanted to do 2 years ago or whenever we went. And I'm I don't actually get why we didn't, except that we just hadn't made that decision that we were going to.
And I feel we kind of we were okay, this year we need to be better at just swimming in the lake if you want to swim in the lake, because it's way too easy to just say oh no, I don't have time or I need to do this other thing. But we felt it just really boosted our mood. Our bodies felt better physically. Legitimately, we were way cooler the rest of our walkout. And then you don't feel all grimy and gross.
And so once we got back to our car, we realized that we were somewhat close to Leavenworth. Close meaning it was only an hour additional drive onto our trip. And because we were in the mood of just doing things spur of the moment, we decided that we were going to go there and get our favorite calzone, which we've talked about before after the Glacier Peak Wilderness. So we popped over to Leavenworth, got our calzones, got our beer cheese pretzel, which Molly's been waiting for well over a year because she was so disappointed when we didn't get it last year. And then we started our drive home. And honestly, we were just so glad that we'd gone there. Like I said, it had been on my list for quite a long time. It had been on Molly's radar for a couple years. And it was just such a treat because I feel in my mindset is often if you're going to a lake in the Alpine Lakes Wilderness, it's just going to be teeming with people. But it was kind of cool to go to a lake where it actually felt kind of remote and kind of quiet. And I don't know if that would be anyone else's experience, going on a Saturday night. But at least there are places out there that do still exist like that.
And wow, the view of the lake was amazing, but all we had to do was turn, 180 degrees, and then we were just viewing Mount Daniel and Cathedral Rock, perhaps is what it's called, and just so much out there. And then it's pretty wild because you can see the Pacific Crest Trail. It's on the other side of the valley. You can see it cutting through. So, like we said, driving out, there was this one pass. It was called Patty Go Easy Pass. And Carrie looked it up. There were maybe 2 cars there. And so that trail, it ascends super sharply. How much?
Yeah. Anytime something says something about easy, like, oh, Patty go easy, you might be like, oh, that's going to be an easy trail. It's like, if it says easy, what you should prepare yourself for is it's going to be really hard and steep because I don't know why, but they'd love to do opposite day. So anyway, I don't remember exactly where that goes, but I do remember that as we were leaving, I was like, I kind of had said like, well, we're going to do Tuck and Robin, and then we're probably not going to come back to this area again because we'll have gone to all the places we want to go. But going there and going to a lake that was not just super Insta famous or popular, although it is popular, but going there and kind of experiencing a little bit of solitude out there, all I can think is like there are so many lakes and just beautiful areas out there that are probably just waiting to be explored that would have even greater solitude because they're probably not very popular on Instagram. They don't have that really special colored hue, or maybe they're just not as striking. But I think that that's an area where I definitely love to go back. And I've seen that some people do like the Alpine Lakes Traverse. I don't know anything about it or its difficulty level or anything like that, but I think that we'll definitely be back in that area sometime. Thank you so much for listening to yet another episode of the
Two Sisters on Adventures podcast.
We hope you'll join us next week for another recap about backpacking somewhere soon to be revealed. Bye.